presentations, and this is probably going to be 10 minutes. I'm hoping it's going to be 10 minutes, not rehearsed beforehand, and I've genuinely lost track of what day it is. I think it's day 4, but I cannot be totally sure about this. And I just got back from like a 15-minute reading session of the Eurovision and post-Cold War history book. I only got through the introduction, but reading the introduction has given me such a great plan on how to take notes on it going forward. I love reading about the author's intentions, and I'm sort of hoping to take those intentions as I sort of take notes on this for what is hopefully to be a summer project, or if not, just a bunch of knowledge acquired. Always good, never a bad thing to have a little too much knowledge. And today, what I want to talk about is confidence. Yes. You saw me staring wistfully off because I totally forgot what I was actually going to say, which means that I didn't exude that much confidence while talking, but I wanted to talk about confidence today. Why? My original thought for this video was that this morning I went to the Hedrick Movement Studio, and I thought that for this video I would record myself trying the Kyle Alessandro dance, and that I would sort of record my progression through it. It would be the first video in which I have cut edits. I would, have to layer music on top of it, things like that. But what ended up really happening is that I did not do the Kyle Alessandro dance, like basically at all. What I ended up doing instead is trying to practice my turns and technique and things like that. So I felt that I was being more productive than I anticipated. And productivity is of course a stretch here. I was doing this all to avoid studying for my CS final. That was today, so thoughts and prayers. But yeah, I did not end up doing the dance. And whether this was intentional or not is a question that remains to be debated. I initially think, no, this wasn't intentional, but as I look a little bit deeper into what I may have been thinking, what I might have subconsciously thought, I realized that, this may have been a conscious decision. But now that that's not there, that doesn't mean I no longer want to talk about the dance. Why? Because my goal with the Kyle Alessandro dance was to get it down to a T the way that the backup dancers were doing it. So I know that a lot of dance is about personal interpretation, and it's about you learn the general gist of the moves, or maybe even like musically, you find out what beats you're meant to hit, perhaps with how you're supposed to hit them, when you're supposed to hit them. Perhaps they do a motion that reflects the words, something like that. And you take these sort of overall characteristics of the dance and turn them back in your own way. You stay true to some amount of the source material, but ultimately it should be your own. That's the way I sometimes perceive learning choreography. It's the way I used to perceive learning choreography, and I got so frustrated when teachers would tell me like, no, you're doing this too sharp, too slow. I'm like, well, I did fundamentally what you asked me to. You're just looking at nuances now. And it made sense in that context because those were group dances, and you want everyone to be as homogeneous as possible in a group dance. But this was a solo dance, and yet I didn't take the perspective that I always took. I wanted to look exactly like the backup dancers. I did not care, that I had a different style. And I noticed that the first time I tried anything they were doing it, I always stretched it out. And I feel like I'm not too experienced with jazz dancing, but I feel like I always jazzed it out, So they would do some kind of sort of casual, nonchalant move, like they're trying to look cool. And I would kind of turn it into like a Broadway looking, over exaggeration of it. And at some point I was talking to my roommates and some of my friends, and I showed them this dance, and I'm like, guys, I don't understand why this dance has stuck with me so much. I haven't felt a dance take over my mind as much as it had since TikTok, and since I was, 10 or 11, and I was just repeating TikTok dances. I haven't done that in a long time, but this felt essentially like the same kind of entrapped, and I grew curious about why I had felt this entrapped about anything of the sorts. And sort of what Harini helped me land on was that they were just purely exuding so much confidence, just so much, that they could have been doing any set of moves and I would have enjoyed it just because they seemed confident. And I was hesitant to accept this at first because I was thinking of musical reasons that I liked it. Oh, they hit that little underlying half beat that I didn't notice, or oh, their hand motion really goes with the words in a way that I hadn't thought about previously. But over time, I've kind of realized she was right. And what it really took for me to realize that she was right wasn't the dance, and it wasn't attempting to learn the dance. It was two other factors. The first kind of has to do with dance, so I lied. The first really short factor is just that when I attempted it in front of her, I felt like I looked nothing like the dancers. When I was doing it alone at the movement studio, I swore I was just a carbon copy. Like I totally got that down. But another thing that had me thinking was the importance of networking in careers, and that not always do the best careers go to the most qualified people to do them. And this had me thinking about a scale I'm sure we're all super duper experienced with, especially if you're in the STEM or if you're in sciences or things like that, as opposed to, not even as opposed to social sciences, but as opposed to more like network-based sciences. So for example, when I started studying CS, as I'm currently studying CS, I know I'm not at all experienced. I'm definitely not experienced enough for any kind of position that involves any kind of technical coding or things like that. I just don't know enough of any language, and that's fine. But as I continue to learn more, I realize how much less I know. And there's a curve for this. There's a very special curve for this, in which as you learn a skill, the rate at which you improve is slower than the rate at which you understand your field. And so the disparity kind of grows between what you really know how to do and what you think you should know what to do. Sorry, that was my low battery. The disparity grows between what you know how to do and what you think you should know how to do or what you know about. And this sort of leads to feelings of insufficiency and, being shy, being a little bit, how did Christina put it? Kind of justifying your thoughts before they go out, or sort of like, preemptively saying something negative so it seems a little more positive. On the contrary, you have a lot of people who aren't qualified who know how to market themselves. And I'm not trying to sell you like a B2B or anything like that, but there is value in marketing the skills that you do have. And there's a balance. There's a balance where you need to be sufficiently good at the task, but still be able to market it. So if you don't know how to do the task at all, you market yourself so well you get it, that's negative. If you know how to do the task really well, but you can't market yourself enough to get that position, that's also negative. So somewhere in between there's a balance. Somewhere in between there's something that's going on where you, not only do you know a sufficient amount to do the job, but you know that you know the sufficient amount. And you don't feel as though you're underwhelming to sort of the community or the job or anything like that. And I'm not sure if this is turning into career advice. I hope it's not, because I certainly don't have a career. I'm quitting my only job, the only job I got, because I marketed myself as a freshman who was willing to work there for 4 years. She was not. But yeah, and so I guess this kind of also leads into what are some ways that you can know that you're doing enough, or how can you know what the skill level required is and what your skill level is. And of course there are objective metrics for this type of thing. I'm sure that a lot of technical based interviews, like a lot of consulting clubs at our school, a lot of CS jobs, things like that, they'll have technical interviews and ask you on the spot questions just to know that you know the baseline skills. But you often don't get to those technical interviews without marketing yourself first, which I think is interesting that the marketing comes first. Is that there are plenty of people that will drop out from the applicant pool that have marketed themselves well, but didn't, never backed up what they were saying, contrarily to a lot of people who may not have marketed themselves as well, so they never made it into the applicant pool, but they would have beat those guys in the dust during the actual technical interviews, right? And I'm personally afraid of technical interviews. I've never done one. I will probably have to do at least several in my life, maybe even close for clubs and stuff. That's a little scary to think about. But I think that for the time being, it's easier to work on marketable skills than technical skills, in my opinion. But that also may have to be an opinion based on the fact that I'm not very passionate about the subject I'm studying. Because learning marketable skills is almost a bit sort of like social engineering. It is very much social engineering, actually. And I feel pretty constantly the need to learn how to social engineer with, the people I'm close with, because when I don't social engineer, as I've, talked about a couple videos ago, when I don't insert myself into active conversations, I don't, get very close to others. But, so that's a skill that's, I feel, more relevant and open than technical skills. So, yeah, lots to say about confidence. Do I lack it? Do I have it? I honestly never know on a minute-to-minute basis, but that's my talk on confidence.